But let me jump right in to talking about taking control of your finances. 5 steps to success. So today, I'm obviously talk about money and the 5 steps that I believe are the most critical to, get control of those finances. One caveat and something important to say: this is not financial advice. So I'm going to be speaking very general terms from my own personal perspective, things that I've done, the steps that I've taken and that I've learned. If you do want financial advice or seek financial advice, please seek someone who's legally able to give financial advice. That's a mouthful. And I thought I'd take a picture of me in the other corner in case this is really blurry and you can't see who I am. So let's dive right in to the presentation and the agenda for today. So I'm going to start off with a bit of an introduction about who I am, why on earth have the Purposeful Project asked me to speak about personal finance. I will then dive further into 5 steps to success, so building those 5 financial foundations, the really key important things. But once you've got hold of that, everything else is uphill from there. And then lastly, like I said, a bit of a Q&A. So feel free to drop them in the message as we go along, and we'll try and pick some good ones for the end. And if we miss them, I apologize. I will try and also make this applicable not only personal finance, but for business finance. But what I would say from the start is that everyone starting a business is obviously also really well aware and has to be very much so in control of their own personal finances at the same time. So this will be a really important thing for you to know whilst you're setting up your business. Some people are obviously tight when it comes to money. They've put a lot of stuff into that business. They've made a big commitment. So being able to manage your own personal finance on the side is a massive superpower that you need to get control of as early as possible when jumping into that kind of stuff. And like I said, this is not financial advice, so we'll keep going. I'll probably keep repeating that. I apologize in advance. So, bit of an introduction about who I am. So I've stuck my kind of TikTok bio because this is kind of where I come from and why the Purposeful Project have asked me to speak. So my name is Gabriel. I've been creating content online for the past 2+ years about personal finance. If we go even further back about my background, I studied engineering. I then went into finance, did that for 2 years whilst building content on the side about personal finance. And eventually, in summer of 2022, left my job to be a full-time content creator, where I've had really good success, thankfully, like really grateful about it. Over 150 million views on content across all platforms, over 1.5 million across all platforms combined. And I focus on making content about finance mixed with entertainment. So a bit like education and entertainment blended into two. My purpose, I suppose I should say that, behind why I do what I do is you can't really teach people in short form content everything they need to know about personal finance. But what you can do is inspire someone or just spark a little bit of interest in someone to start doing their own research and starting their own financial journey. And that's what I try to do: give someone an interesting financial topic or learn one quick lesson in 30 seconds, 60 seconds. And hopefully from there, they will be, that's interesting, let me look more into this. And they'll start their financial journey from there, because personally, that's how it started for me. So why do I talk about personal finance in the first place? Well, I suppose it's a subject that's not taught in school, right? So unless you go out and seek financial literacy, you very much so will never get that education. And we all have to deal with money. We'll earn money. We're all trying to make money. It's part of everyone's life. So it's such an important lesson that was never taught in school. So I started my own kind of financial journey at, let's say, 18, 19. I was always working, doing gigs on the side, earning money, and I wanted to know what to do with it. So I became that person that was always looking for the best bank account with the best interest rate. I'd have like 4 or 5 accounts open at various times. And yeah, that was me. And then my friends, family would always come to me being like, which account do you want to open? Which account should I be opening? Where should I be putting my money? Again, I wasn't a financial advisor at the time, but I probably did give them advice. Don't tell anyone I said that. But I was just sharing what I was doing with my money, more or less. And that's how I got interested. That's kind of what stemmed the interest. And I built my knowledge from there, started reading. I've read so many hundreds of books on the subject now, learned so much. And I'm really happy that I'll be able to share some of that information with you here today. So again, this is not financial advice, but let's now jump into, the meat of the presentation. So I'll start with a bit of a quote, which says, "Formal education will make you a living, but self-education will make you a fortune." I think that was really a great quote by Jim Rohn, who's an entrepreneur from the US. And it's really key. You guys here aren't forced to be here. You guys are doing this through self-education. So that's an amazing first step. So well done for taking the time out of I'm sure your busy day. If you're celebrating the bank holiday, Easter, all that kind of stuff, this is your first day back. So well done for jumping straight back into self-education, and keep doing that, because like it says here, it will make you a fortune. So let's start with, I said there were 5 steps. Steps 1 to 3, which I define as the basics. So the basics. So I've always seen with my own personal finance journey that step 1 is about paying off debt strategically. So we always start with debt, because debt is the one thing that we all want to get rid of. That's why I lead with it. It's kind of the worst thing when it comes to finance. However, I'm not going to put a little, star there, because on the screen I've listed good debt and bad debt. So there is such thing as good debt, but I'll get to that in a second. So the conventional idea when it comes to debt is that you want to just get rid of it. You don't want any of it. It's just not a good thing. Pay it off aggressively, as you can see in the bad debt column down the right. And something that's kind of emphasized that idea, or one of the old perspectives on how to manage your debt, is the snowball method. Dave Ramsey, he's a big personal finance radio host in the US, very passionate about this way of taking on your debt. The snowball method is a kind of more psychological than a mathematical approach. And it's this whole idea that get your smallest debt, pay it off as quickly as possible, and it, like a snowball, it starts small, and as it rolls down the hill like a snowball will, it grows larger and larger. So then you take on the bigger debt, and then the bigger debt. And this whole idea is that you'll get that little, boost of inspiration and gratification for paying off that small debt that will lead you to pay off the bigger and bigger debts. And that's how you go. Now, this is great, but a lot of major streams, the way of thinking is actually, why don't we pay off debt strategically? So instead of doing it this way, which is psychologically, you'll have these small wins and they'll get bigger and bigger, and they'll motivate you perhaps. Why not actually pay off debt in a way that will have you owing or giving away the least of your money over the long term? And that's this mathematical approach, the interest approach. And that allows us to even take into account good debt. So how does this work? It's all about paying off that debt with the highest interest rate. So to compare the snowball method versus the interest method, I've got an example, really easy. Student loan, let's say you've got 2 debts. You've got a student loan debt of £2,000 at 4% interest, and you've got a credit card debt at £5,000 with 18% interest. The snowball method will tell you take that smallest debt off first, the £2,000 method. The logical and mathematical approach says get rid of that highest interest rate first. Take off that credit card debt first. So even if I was to swap the percentages round, and now it'd be a £2,000 debt with 18% interest, or a £5,000 debt with a 4% interest, this mathematical approach says now take that £2,000 debt first, because it's got that 18% interest rate. So it's all about taking off the one that is kind of compounding and growing against you at the fastest rate, save the most money over the long term. And then it comes down to this good debt versus bad debt, which is all about finding your magic number. So the magic number is kind of the number above it, which you will want to pay off your debt aggressively, throw as much money as that debt, because it's going to grow and really hurt you in the long term. Whereas if you're below that magic number, that magic interest rate percentage, then you could pay off minimum payments. And I'll explain to you why now. So the reason behind that is that, for example, when it comes to my own personal life, I invest. And with my investments, the historical average of where I'm investing is roughly 8 to 9% over the past 20 to 25 years. Of course, historical returns doesn't guarantee future returns. However, I'm confident that even with a safety net, dropping that number down to, let's say you're hoping to get 6% returns over the long term, I'm confident with that, and in terms of my risk tolerance and in terms of investing. So 6% is my magic number. If I have any debts below 6% interest rate, I would rather put my money into my investment, because I believe the money will grow faster and quicker in that rate. So I'll basically be earning more than I would be paying off, need to pay off, essentially. You see that gap? So my investments would grow quicker than my debt would grow. I'd have more money. Vice versa, if anything was above that 6% rate, I would want to pay it off as aggressively as possible. So that's how I found my magic number, and it's important for you to find yours as well. Next, emergency fund, step 2, or as I like to call it, the oh shit fund. So this is when shit hits the fan. And we build this to basically have confidence in our finances. It's the backup for the worst case scenario. You lose your job, you can't find one for the next 6 months, you have no money coming in, but you've got bills to pay. Where do you have that money? Building that emergency fund now, whilst you're in a good position, essentially allows you to be confident with your finances and start to build upon it and take the next steps. So where should you be keeping your emergency fund? Now, this is somewhere that essentially needs to be really safe and really accessible. So somewhere not in a 1-year fixed saving account that has 4%, because you can't get that in a year, and who knows, your car might break down and you might need that lump of cash tomorrow. So this is somewhere that needs to be accessible. So when I look at this, also the interest rate isn't too important. Of course, there are easy access accounts with 2-3% nowadays in the UK, maybe even higher, 3.5%. So yeah, you can put the money there, but the interest rate is kind of not going to do too much because you're not holding, hopefully, too much of your money in there. It's just enough in case, like I said, shit hits the fan. How much do you need? Again, general consensus on this is 3 to 6 months living expensive and you can be along that like kind of time span, dependent on your own personal circumstances. I'm at the 3-month end because I kind of have a much higher risk tolerance. But people potentially, if you've got kids, you've got much more bills, you've got much more responsibilities. In case you get laid off from your job or in case your business doesn't take off, all that kind of stuff, you might want to go towards that 6-month living expenses. And living expenses, really important here, is all necessary bills. So I'm not telling you to include your living expenses is that, your Netflix account, because let's say you needed that emergency fund to pay off those emergency bills, you'd probably cancel your Netflix account. So you don't have to include that in case this scenario happens. Personally, again, for me, this is 10 to 15K that I like to have into that account. And this is, like I said, one of the hardest things to put aside, but arguably the most impactful. It'll give you so much confidence and stability in your finances to take it to the next level. Now, level 2 of creating an emergency fund is for those of you that I suppose are a little bit happy to take on a risk, and this is how I do it again. And it's about separating my emergency fund into 2 pots. I've got the oh shit pot, which is like that 6 weeks. I don't care about the interest rate. I've got 6 weeks of cash just sitting there ready to go in case I lose a job, I need to pay a bill, my boiler breaks, so many things can happen unexpectedly in life, and that's just money to have there. And then the other 6 weeks that I have, because it totals for me 3 months, is in a really low risk investment. So I want it to at least grow a little bit. I want it to do something, but that investment is not going to keep me up at night. I'm not going to be stressed about it. I'm not going to be worried about it. And so that's why I put it into that. I want it to grow a little bit, and I'm happy to kind of separate that and have a little bit more risk, but at the same time, a risk level that isn't, in my opinion, one that I'm going to be concerned about in the slightest. So we've done that. Next step, of course, is, I say, of course, investing. I've spoken about it a few times. So I'm going to be really brief here. I'm not going to teach you about investing or how to invest, but I'm just going to share you some core concepts. So the first thing is knowledge. These days, knowledge, you don't really need to know how to invest. Of course, it's important, go out there, learn the basics, do your own research, always. However, there are now platforms that have robo-advisors. One off the top of my head is a platform like Nutmeg. So a robo-advisor is one where you can go in, it will ask you like 10 questions. What's your risk tolerance? How do you feel if this happened? How much money do you have to put aside? All this kind of stuff. And voila, it will build you a fund that you can invest into. And that fund could contain, hundreds, if not thousands of companies from across the world. And that's such an amazing thing. You've gone from not having any idea about investing, answering a few of their questions, and they've built you something that is kind of, works exactly to the way that you want it to work. So I think there's really no excuse and there's no barrier when it comes to investing anymore. Of course, go out, learn a little bit more about it, watch a couple of YouTube videos. That's how I did it, to understand how investing works and the basics of it. But you don't really need to know much more than that to start. Next is why invest in the first place? And it's all about this thing called compound interest. This idea that your money grows exponentially with an investment. So let's say you're earning on average, 5% interest rate, maybe 7%. I said my magic number was 6%. Over a long-term period of time, that money grows. So it grows slower in the shorter run, but as it compiles on top of each other, again, a bit like a snowball, it will grow bigger and faster and faster. So to give you a bit of a visual on this, I've got a beautiful little calculator, hopefully that you can still see here. So what I've taken here and what I've inputted to that will show you here is if I had invested for 42 years, so that's from the age of 18, probably when I started earning money, till the age of 60, when I could try and retire, that's 42 years. I took the average return rate from the market, the S&P, over the past 25 years, which is 9%, and I put aside £100 every single month. What you can see here is after those 42 years, I will have invested £50,000 or just over, and the market would have returned me £500,000, which is an incredible superpower. And you can obviously go on this, type in calculator.net, mix up the numbers, and it can show you kind of the potential of what your money can do. Now, the cool thing here, or the worrying thing here, is let's say, for example, I had invested for only 35 years. This is what happens all of a sudden to that number. It drops in half. So having invested up until maybe I didn't start at 18, but I started 7 years down the line from 25 to the age of 60, All of a sudden, my total money at the end of that period is almost half of what it had been if I'd started at 18. And this shows you the effect of what happens at that later stage down the line. And it's really important why it's, again, it says to invest early and often. I can show you the opposite again. And if I invested from the age of, 18 to 68, let's say, which is a period of 50 years, all of a sudden that money is over £1 million, having invested for just another 8 years. Again, showing you that effect of what happens longer and like later down the line. So let's dive back into this presentation. The last thing I want to talk about, this is relevant for those in the UK, is this whole thing of tax advantaged accounts. So let's say you had that £1 million of profit from your investment account 60 years down the line that you've been investing for 60 years of your life. The government might come and take that money away. Well, not take that money away. When you want to withdraw that money and actually spend it, they might say, well, you owe some tax. However, there are tax advantaged accounts in the UK. There'll probably be some in your own country, so look into it. In the UK, it's called an ISA, and that gives you a £20,000 a year limit. So you can put in that much every single year into an account, and any profits you earn off of that cannot be taxed when you withdraw it. So when you make that, let's say £1 million in 60 years' time, they can't take any of that from tax. And that's just something to look into. ISAs, investment saving account, interest saving accounts, ISA. And there's several types. There's more to it, but that's essentially the premise of it. And I've seen a question. Some of us may be way over 18 years old. How would it be applicable then? Well, the truth is you can just mix around the numbers to your own time periods of potentially when you hope to retire. And it still works. Hopefully at an older age, you might even have more money to put away. Hopefully you're earning more at 18 than you were at 18. So what you can do is, of course, just adjust the numbers, be a bit more aggressive with your investments. If you want to do something like that, adjust your risk policy, again, for your age. And that would be a way to take it on, because I think that it's never too late to start investing. The earlier, the better, but the earliest stage that you have watching this is right now. So that's all I can give you in terms of advice. And of course, someone said you need to take inflation to those numbers. Yes, of course, a lot of these numbers need to be adjusted for inflation, but let's hope that inflation isn't as what it is today, like 10%. Hopefully it drops down over that 60-year period and averages at around 2%. So your returns will still be better than had you just put it in an account that had nothing that was coming back to it. So that's kind of the concept of investing. So next step, we're going to go into the most important rule, the rule that circulates those first 3 steps. And I say is step 4. And it's the idea of living below your means. So let me explain a little bit behind that, and then I can dive further into a few more details. So the whole idea behind living below your means is that it will supercharge those first 3 steps. Supercharge them, make everything quicker. You can put more away, all that kind of stuff. It's just one of the most fundamental rules that you should be trying to apply to your life. And like it says here, it's the most important habit. Why is that? It's about not stealing tomorrow's reality by faking it now. Don't live a lifestyle where you're living maybe paycheck to paycheck now, if you can. That is, of course, I know that context and everyone's situations are different. But if you're faking it now and trying to live this glamorous lifestyle, you're doing it at the expense of actually being able to afford a higher quality of lifestyle later in life. So it's just something to be aware of. Again, I'm not saying you need to give up today's happiness for tomorrow's happiness. That's a debate of whether you should be happy today or in the future, but it's just being smart about it. And why is this such an important habit? So there's these ideas, there are so many people in my circle, especially that I know, that I call £30,000 a year millionaires. And what I mean is they earn £30,000 a year. They spend half of that on the financing for the car that they drive, and they drive around as if they're earning £100,000 a year. This is what I mean. They look like millionaires. They're just not. So they're living well above their means. And the last bullet point here says high earners that need to retain that level. Again, there are so many people that are earning big paychecks or earning so much money these days. However, they can't lose their job, because if they lost their job or their business went under, they wouldn't be able to sustain the lifestyle that they're currently living. They are living paycheck to paycheck, even at massive paychecks, which is crazy. So one thing that you should take away from this is the could versus should mentality. Just because you can afford something doesn't mean you should afford it. So that's just really important. So how do you come and actually practically tackle this? So on the right-hand side, you can see there are 3 main categories of your expenses: food, transport, and housing. Those are the 3 biggest expense categories for the majority of people in the world. So those are the ones you want to look at, really dive into and think, where can you cut the costs from those? I'm not telling you to give up your weekly Starbucks. So if you're going for a Starbucks and you're like, oh, I could save £150 a year by not drinking Starbucks once a week, that's not the category I'm telling you to attack, because probably that Starbucks is giving you massive levels of enjoyment. You may be meeting a friend. It's a social thing. I'm not telling you to give that up. Go for the three biggest buckets first. And this is important regardless of how much you're earning. So again, another step for this that is really important is to calculate how much your life costs. Most people know how much money they're earning. Not a lot of people know how much money is leaving their bank account and where it's going. It's a really hard thing to take on. I struggled to look into my bank account and actually admit and accept where my money was going. But unless you know where it's going, you can't even start to solve the problem and know where to make those cuts. So that is vital. And now it leads us to the final step. Credit cards can be powerful tools. I don't know why there's not a space between be and powerful. I apologize. So credit cards, a lot of people think they are kind of the enemy. They're horrible. And they can be. They can be awful, awful things. But the truth is, simply, they are just tools. And whether they're good or bad is dependent on the user of the credit card. So that's why I've applied kind of 4 golden rules when it comes to credit cards before I get on to kind of the benefit of why we would even use a credit card in the first place. And again, do your own knowledge, research, and this isn't financial advice. But when it comes to my own personal golden rules for using a credit card, this is how I play it. If I can't pay it twice on a debit card, or if I don't have twice that amount in my bank account, I can't buy it on a credit card. If I don't pay it off in full every single month, I can't have a credit card because those interest rates are not your friend. Credit cards notoriously are well known for having high interest rates. So if you pay it off in full every month, you'll never pay a penny in interest. But if you can't do that, then credit cards might not be the right tool for you to bring into your life. And there are credit cards with 0% rates, things like that. But again, I think it's just about best practices at this point, because ultimately, when you get into the kind of game of credit cards, it's kind of, you want to build those habits early on. So if you're getting a credit card, even with 0%, my recommendation, or the way that I would manage it still personally, is to still, pay it off in full every month. And then this idea of credit utilization rate. So when you get a credit card, you get a credit limit. So for example, I get a credit card, they say, you have £5,000 to spend on this credit card. So great. I personally, and a lot of people, will increase their credit rating, which is kind of how the banks look at you and your trustworthiness. And I look to never spend more than 30 to 40% of my credit limit. So what this does is, let's say I've got a £5,000 limit on my credit card and I spend £1,000. The bank will look at me and be like, we can offer this person £5,000, but they're only taking £1,000. That's a really responsible person. And therefore, my credit rating shoots up. And what does my credit rating allow me to do in the future? It will make getting loans, getting mortgages, getting finances on cards, things like that, a lot easier. If you've got a bad credit rating, these things are going to be much harder for you later in life. So building that, really responsible credit utilization rate and paying off everything in full and all this kind of stuff will increase your credit rating. And that brings us on to the benefits of credit cards. So there's so many things. Purchase protection, which is kind of like an insurance if something goes wrong with a purchase that you've made on a credit card. There are specific rules, but I won't dive into those. You can get things like cashback, air miles, discounts, free flights, access to events, lounge access. I've got insurance on my credit card, worldwide travel insurance, so I never have to pay for that. You get massive sign-up bonuses. And there's so many benefits of essentially spending it on a credit card, paying off in full, and I'm taking advantage of these credit card companies without ever paying them a penny in interest, because that's the way that you manage it, rather than spending it on a debit card and never getting any kind of benefits or discounts because I'm spending it. But I wouldn't advise. I personally only take on credit cards once I've done steps 1 through 4, because this is kind of like, like level 505, but you need to learn those first fundamental steps before you dive into anything else. And that brings us to the end of the webinar, kind of just in time, actually, for those of you that are here. And so I will look into the chat. Talia, I don't know if you've seen any other questions, but I will answer any and all. Feel free to ask me questions about my journey. It doesn't just have to be personal finance. If you want to know anything about social media as well and how I got into that, I'm happy to answer that topic as well. But thank you very much for everyone for listening to this webinar. But yeah, let's jump into some questions. So we've got from Mohammed, what approach do you use to save money? Do you save more than 70% of your income and live on the rest? So one of the most kind of classic rules when it comes to saving money is this 50-30-20 rule, which is 50% goes on your needs, the things that you need to spend money on. 30% goes on your wants, money that you would like to spend money on. Maybe let's say that's a gym membership or going out every month. And then 20% of your paycheck to go towards your savings. And if you can put that away every single month. Now, of course, you asked me if I save more than 70%. I do not save more than 70%. I think saving more than 70% of the money that's incoming into your account would be a magnificent thing to strive for. If you're able to do that, like bravo. For me personally, I'm trying to push towards that 30-40% rate. But 20% is a really good place to start. But if you're saving nothing, just start small. Start learning to put something away and paying your future self early. And if you can grow that over time, the larger the number, the better, always. What's the most common thing that you need to explain on social media? I'll give you a funny story with that, actually. So a lot of people don't understand how income tax works. One of the largest, most popular videos was people not understanding that you will never earn less money. I think this happens 99.9%. I think this is true all the time, pretty much. But you won't earn less money from jumping into a higher tax bracket. People think that when you jump into a higher tax bracket, your entire paycheck gets taxed at that rate. Where in most countries, well, I can only really speak specifically for the UK, but in most countries, your tax rate, your income tax rate is marginal. So you get taxed at the lower rate on that lower amount, and anything you earn above kind of the threshold gets taxed at the higher amount. You would be surprised at how many people aren't aware of that and who have turned down raises because of not knowing about literally the rules of income tax. They'd rather stay in the lower tax threshold of 20% is here in the UK rather than jumping into the 40% tax threshold, even though they would be taking home more money. There are complications about, like childcare and all this kind of stuff, but this is just kind of the general consensus. Did you personally have a target amount of money to save before you quit your main job? For me, it was more about how much money was coming in revenue-wise. I was very fortunate that by the time I quit my job, I was earning from my business and from social media equal to what I was earning from my job, which really gave me a lot of confidence. But I'd also put away a massive amount of savings. So I put away that when I quit my job, that 6-month emergency fund was there. Because let's say I went all in on my business and I wasn't getting those results that I needed. If I had to apply back and, get a job or, pivot and try something else, I had that money as a backup, which made me really confident and able to quit my job. So did I have a target amount of money to save? For me, yeah, it was that 6 month of living expenses that really made me confident. But I was fortunate in the position that I was at the end of it. I'm seeing mainly the questions in this Q&A section. I think I've answered all 3, and we are at 1 o'clock. I would be happy to answer anything else if any of you still want to ask something. If not, feel free to find my account. I'm sure they'll send it to you, or you can find it in my name in the event, Gabriel Nussbaum. Find me on Instagram, find the real version. There's a lot of copycat accounts. DM me and I will get back to you and I'll answer you anything else. Chris, again, did you grow your social media in another way, or did you just take off organically? My social media account was purely organic, consistent posting, posting the right thing, the right videos at the right time, learning social media whilst I was doing it, and just really hitting the algorithm and knowing what would work well. But yes, it was all organic for me, luckily, through short form content, and I've grown my other channels via that method.
Gabriel, there's a couple of more questions in the normal chat.
Let me jump into the normal chat. Cool. Yeah, I've opened that up. Any you recommend?
Someone said, what's your best credit card?
I use American Express personally, but there are so many. I'll just Google best credit cards and look at, what the money saving expert says. MFC, Martin Lewis. He normally has great recommendations when it comes to it. Any other ideas for investments other than Nutmeg? When it comes to investing, I would normally go online and I type in best investment accounts UK and just go through the pros and cons of all of them, because I can't give you a specific recommendation. I can tell you personally, I use Vanguard. I've used Nutmeg as well. I use Nutmeg as well. But there are better accounts, to be honest, and there are worse accounts. So it's just really dependent on your own personal circumstances. But read through some reviews and you'll really start to understand kind of, all this kind of stuff a lot better. How did you grow your following on social media so quickly? I suppose just consistent posting, really watching what was working on the social media platforms at the time and putting my own spin on those. So don't try and reinvent the wheel when it comes to social media. Try and look what's working and put your own personal stamp on it. That's always the way that I do it. And I still have to do it that way because algorithms change all the time. So what was working for me a year ago no longer works today. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you that are jumping off. Thank you very much. I'll keep answering questions for those of you that are still here. How did I make money on social media and have a good constant stream of cash? So the truth is that I have ups and downs, as most social media content creators do. I try and lock in some long-term partnerships with brands. Brands is the main source of my income. So 90% of my content, 99% of my content is organic. It's just me coming up and giving as much freebies as I can away. Of course, I'm doing this to earn money as well. So I take on some sponsorships and some of the videos, but only if I think they are relevant and good brands, the ones that I would use myself. And with that, I make most of my money. Sometimes I have sponsors lined up for the next 6 months. Sometimes I have sponsors lined up just for the month I'm in, and nothing further than that. So it's a bit all over the place, but that's the majority way that I make money. Some through AdSense as well, and through like kind of the ad sharing that the platforms have. But that is the majority of where I make my money on social media. How should one divide the savings? Let's say you have 10K saved. How shall one distribute it? All in stocks, or I can't really answer the specific questions about specific amounts, but if you go through the presentation, it will give you a rough guidance of how you should be building out the kind of, where you should be putting your money and all that kind of stuff. Is it possible with this inflation rate to retire early if we start investing now, retire at 40s? Most countries normally aim for an inflation rate of about 2%. We're in a very, very unique moment where a lot of circumstances have led to such high inflation rates. So what I would say about that is, and what I do is I try and ignore what's going on in the world and just consistently invest a little bit every month, whatever I can. And in the long run, I'm hoping that kind of you'll see these things happen all the time. Recessions happen, bad things happen. But if you kind of average it out, you kind of invest during the good times and the bad times. That's kind of my approach to investing. I'm going to keep trying to read some questions. If I haven't got to it, feel free to copy and paste your question and put it lower down because it'll be easier for me to catch it again. Digital banks are offering most of that with just debit cards and low account monthly fee. Great. If you can get advantage of that and you see no use for a credit card, then that is an amazing thing. Obviously, building your credit score and the purchase protection of credit cards are really, really cool. Those are two things on their own. But if you've got more benefits from your debit card and you want to use that kind of safer tool, that is absolutely fine as well. I'm not saying you have to use credit cards. I'm just saying personally for me, they have more advantages than they do cons. That's why I use credit cards. Again, you need to master steps 1 through 4 before you even touch a credit card in the first place. I think that's the majority of the questions, Talia. I don't know if you noticed any more, but I hope that everybody enjoyed the presentation, took something valuable away from this. Like I said, feel free to reach out and get in contact offline if you'd like to. Again, hopefully you understood none of this was personal financial advice. This was all general and hopefully inspired you to take kind of those first few steps towards a better financial future.